I was born in a country that didn't even have the map for the world. We don't even know what internet is. We don't even have electricity. And one thing that is so unique about North Korea is that we are not naturally poor. This is where I became the defender of freedom and individual liberty is. If you look at North Korea and South Korea, we share the exact same history. We speak the same language. We have same genetics, and we have same tradition. And now one country, that is South Korea, the country of K-pop and Samsung, right? So much innovation and democracy. And the other side of North Korea, that is people are starving. And they are so remote, so isolated, that we might be able to go to the moon and Mars before we ever go to North Korea. And this is all because of the one family that was Kim family. They decide that they want to be a god in 21st century. So growing up in North Korea, I had no idea the world like this existed. I had zero clue. And at school, all day long, I learned how horrible American bastards were. So it's so surreal for me that I'm surrounded this many bastards, and they love me. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I guess that's why miracle is possible. All day long at school, I learned how horrible the enemies were, how American bastards were like cold-blooded, like reptile, almost like snake monsters who was trying to attack us all day long, and how grateful we were that had our dear leader, the Kim Jong-il, who was like a god, can mount the mountains. He knows what I'm even thinking in my head, and we were the luckiest people on this earth to be living in a socialist paradise. And I know I will go into my story, but I really wanted to touch on how North Korea began. And it's in some ways that like I'm reliving that past by being in America. North Korea began in the idea, not in the idea of like poverty and all these horrible things, but they began the idea of equality of outcomes. How everybody, we all should be equal. So after the World War II ended, in Korea there were landowners and the peasant. And then Kim Il-sung came, he was a Marxist, and promised to people that if you give us your land, right, and if you give us your some of freedom and freedom of speech, we are gonna take all this land from the landowners and the business people, and we are gonna divide them equally to everybody. So there's nobody who's poor or richer than anybody. We are gonna be living in a happy paradise that is perfectly equal. Nobody suffers, nobody's better off than anybody. And my people, my grandmother, they genuinely wanted this. They gave their land. So the regime abolished private property. Nobody in North Korea can own anything. You cannot own your house, you cannot own your car, you cannot own even your body. And they said eventually what they did with that equality of dream, they made North Koreans into 51 different classes among the same people. We are not like America, there's a lot of diversity of race. We are the same Korean homogeneous country, and they divided us into 51 different classes. And this system is so evil because there's two lovers meet each other, right? And you love this girl so much. But if your family status is higher than her, if you marry her, that means in North Korea you don't marry up, you only go down. That's how they prevent the mix of class. So if you ever take the chance of marrying somebody from lower class, not only you go down, but you are bringing down 3 generations of your family go down to that low class. So nobody insane in the family gonna support that marriage. And that's how they could survive this long. So Growing in that country, never seen the map of the world, and I had no idea that I was even Asian because at school that they taught me that I was my dear leader's race, Kim Il Sung's race. And Kim Il Sung, who was grew up in a Christian family, and he one day got a brilliant idea. So, whenever there's a communist revolution happens, they go after religion because the government want to become a god instead. So what they did is they killed all the Christians. They killed all the Buddhists and other religious people. And then he copied the exact same Bible principle. So this is where it comes down to. A lot of people say, why do North Koreans, are they so dumb? Why do they believe this propaganda? It's because Kim Il-sung copied the Bible, said, I love you guys so much, I was chosen by the universe. I'm giving you my son Kim Jong-il, like Jesus Christ. And his body dies, like Jesus did, but his spirit is with us forever. And therefore, he knows what we think and how much hair in our head. And that's how they control what you think. And that's how they make you even afraid to think being in that country. So, and then of course the 10 commandments the Bible has, and they copy their version of the thing. So because basically Kim regime became a god, and they brainwashed us to believe that they are gods. So when I came out, I couldn't believe when people telling me that Kim Jong-un actually poops. He goes to bathroom. And yesterday I was hearing about all these intellectuals, and I was thinking about today's speech. I was like, I was literally, somebody thought the most handsome guy was Kim Jong-il when I was in North Korea. That's how ignorant I was, how brainwashed I was, and what I'm gonna talk about today here. And so that complete control the information and isolation and division between people. And this is also why I really decided to speak out today, especially in this time of America. It breaks my heart. When people being divided and not trusting each other, you know who wins? People in control, people in government. North Korean regime did such a good job. If there's 3 people here, then we are spying on somebody and somebody spying on me. But that person also being spied by somebody. So even if I'm gonna be such a nice person that I'm not gonna report on my neighbor, that I know is somebody spying on me. That person decided not to spy on me, but that person also being watched. So you cannot escape this cycle of spying on somebody, and you have to report on other people. That destroys trust between your neighbors, your friends, and your family members. And that's why that trust between people is very important. So after all this brainwashing, came down to one moment that was just as simple as that. It was basic survivor. I was 13 years old, and I was living in a border town. It was 2007, and I just couldn't survive. There's no food. There's nothing we could do to find food. And luckily, I was living in the border town of North Korea, and I saw the lights coming from China. And that's when I got the hint. If I go where the lights were, I could find a bowl of rice. So when I escaped in North Korea, it's so funny because I did not even know what freedom was. I was just simply risking my life for a bowl of rice. Once I went to China at 13, I realized there was a state sponsored by modern slavery by Chinese communist regime. They sell North Korean girls for sex slaves. And because China had a one-child policy, there are millions of men cannot find women. There's a shortage of women who can marry these men. So they buy North Korean girls. And this is life is so bizarre. I think 2 years ago during the pandemic, the lockdown, I got so lonely living in Chicago. So one day I drove to a pet store that my friend suggested. And she said these puppies were treated so nice by a breeder, and it's ethical to get these puppies. So I was I got this puppy that was $7,000. It's a very expensive puppy, the size of my like fist or something. And I was thinking, I was like less than $300 when I was sold. Literally the same lifetime. And and then, of course, during the looting and BLM living in America, these people believe they are the most oppressed people in the world that ever existed. And like, how do I ever even tell these people that slavery even never ended? And there are people continuously being oppressed. So in China at 13, I was a sex slave for 2 years. I was separate from all my family. And my mother, who was around 40 years old, she was sold for around $65. 2 years later, miraculously, I met a missionaries from South Korea. And they finally told me about real God and Jesus Christ. And they told me there was a way out of that slavery, which was crossing the Gobi Desert, frozen Gobi Desert into Mongolia. And if we were lucky that we survived that in the desert and go to Mongolia, then we might be able to rescue to South Korea. And that was when I was 15 years old in 2009. So I did go on that journey, crossing the desert. And luckily, I survived and I arrived in South Korea.